I'm a 28-year-old guy from the Midwest, working full-time and pursuing a degree part-time. I've always been someone who works hard for what I want. My family didn't have much growing up, so I had to figure out how to navigate college tuition on my own. That's how I landed a scholarship, a full ride for my final year, thanks to my academic and volunteer work. It was a game changer for me, especially since I'd been paying out of pocket until then, juggling school and work. My fiancée, let's call her Qley, was someone I thought I could trust. We'd been together for 4 years and engaged for 1. She came from a well-off family, and while I sometimes felt the differences between our financial backgrounds, I never thought it mattered to her. Turns out I was dead wrong. The whole thing started unraveling after I got the scholarship. I was over the moon and shared the news with Qley immediately. Her reaction? Underwhelming, to put it nicely. She gave me a half-hearted, "Oh, that's great," and went back to scrolling through her phone. I chalked it up to her being distracted, but in hindsight, it was the first red flag. A few weeks later, I noticed something odd with my savings. I'd set aside money to pay for my tuition before I knew about the scholarship, and I planned to use it for other expenses like books and rent. But when I checked my account, a good chunk of it was missing. Confused, I went through my transaction history and saw several withdrawals I didn't recognize. My stomach dropped when I saw the locations: spas, high-end boutiques, and restaurants I'd never been to. I confronted Qley that night. "Do you know anything about these charges?" I asked, showing her the bank statement. Her face turned red, and she hesitated before responding. "Yeah, I used it. But come on, you don't need that money anymore. You got your scholarship, didn't you?" I stared at her, trying to process what I'd just heard. "You spent my tuition money? Without asking me?" "You're being dramatic," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like you're going to miss it. I needed a few things, and you've been so stressed about school. I thought treating myself would make things easier for both of us." I couldn't believe the audacity. That money wasn't for spa days or designer clothes. It was for rent bills, stuff we both rely on. Instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "You're acting like I stole it. We're going to be married, remember? What's yours is mine." That was the moment I realized something fundamental about Qley. She didn't respect me or the sacrifices I'd made. But things only got worse from there. After that confrontation, I started digging. I checked my accounts more carefully and discovered she'd not only dipped into my tuition savings, but had also been making unauthorized charges to my credit card for months. When I brought it up again, she accused me of policing her and said I was obsessed with money. She even tried to turn it into an argument about how I didn't trust her enough to share finances. Her entitlement was staggering. But the final straw came when I overheard a phone call between her and her friend. She was laughing, saying something like, "It's not like he's ever going to notice. He's too busy playing the poor little scholarship boy." Hearing her mock something I was so proud of felt like a punch to the gut. I realized I couldn't stay in a relationship with someone who saw me as a means to an end. The next day, I told her I was done. She laughed, thinking I was bluffing. But when I started packing my things, she panicked. "You're really going to throw everything away over a little money?" she asked, blocking the door. "This isn't about the money, Qley. It's about trust, and you broke it." She started crying, saying she'd pay me back, that she'd only borrowed it because she thought I wouldn't mind. But I wasn't buying it. I left that day and moved in with a friend while I figured out my next steps. But here's where things got messy. After I left, I discovered she'd racked up more debt in my name. She'd opened a credit card using my information and maxed it out. When I confronted her about it, she acted indignant, saying, "Well, you weren't helping me out, so I had to do something." That's when I decided to take legal action. It wasn't an easy decision. Part of me felt guilty for dragging this into court, but I knew if I let her get away with it, she'd just do it to someone else. I gathered all the evidence: bank statements, credit card bills, screenshots of her texts admitting to using my money, and filed a police report for theft and fraud. Qley tried every trick in the book to avoid accountability. She called my family, painting me as some controlling boyfriend who was punishing her for living her life. She even tried to claim I'd given her permission to use the money. But the paper trail told a different story. When the case went to court, her entitled attitude didn't do her any favors. She showed up acting like the victim, saying she'd only spent the money because she thought we were building a life together. But when my lawyer presented the evidence, her lies unraveled. The judge didn't buy her excuses and ruled in my favor. Qley was ordered to pay back everything she'd taken, plus damages for the credit card fraud. She also faced criminal charges for identity theft, which resulted in probation and a hefty fine. Watching her face as the verdict was read was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. For years, I'd bent over backward to make her happy, only to be treated like a doormat. Seeing her finally face the consequences of her actions was vindicating in a way I can't fully describe. Since then, I've moved on. I finished my degree thanks to that scholarship and landed a job in my field. The experience taught me a lot about boundaries and the importance of choosing partners who truly respect you. So yeah, that's the story of how my fiancé mocked my scholarship, stole my tuition money, and ended up in court for theft. If you're dealing with someone who constantly crosses your boundaries, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, even if it means taking the hard road. After the court case, you'd think Qley would have learned her lesson, but entitlement runs deep. A few weeks after the judgment, she showed up at my workplace unannounced. I'd been careful about keeping my personal life separate from my job, but she must have figured out where I worked through mutual acquaintances. She caused a scene right in the middle of the lobby, loudly accusing me of ruining her life. "You had no right to drag me through the mud like that," she shouted, drawing the attention of my coworkers. I calmly walked her outside to avoid further embarrassment and told her flat out, "You need to leave." The court decided, and this conversation is over. But she didn't leave quietly. She started screaming about how she'd make me pay for what I'd done. I ignored her threats and walked back inside, but it was clear she wasn't done. A week later, I noticed strange charges on my accounts again. This time, though, I'd taken precautions. After the court case, I'd frozen my credit and set up alerts for any activity. Turns out, Qley had tried to open another credit card in my name, but it was flagged immediately. I reported her to the authorities again, and this time, it was a violation of her probation. Her second court appearance was even more damning. The judge didn't take kindly to her repeated behavior and escalated her punishment. She was sentenced to a short stint in jail, followed by extended probation and mandatory financial counseling. For a while, things went quiet. I focused on rebuilding my life, paying off the debt she'd left behind, and working toward financial stability. But Qley's actions had left a lasting impact. Trusting people became harder, and I found myself second-guessing everyone's intentions. It wasn't just about the money. It was the betrayal, the mockery, and the entitlement that stuck with me. My friends and family were supportive throughout, though. My dad, a straight-talking kind of guy, told me, "You dodged a bullet, son." Imagine being married to someone like that. He was right. Still, moving on wasn't easy. I started therapy to work through the lingering resentment and to ensure I didn't carry that baggage into future relationships. It helped me recognize the red flags I'd ignored with Qley. The subtle ways she belittled my accomplishments, her sense of superiority because of her family's wealth, and her constant need for validation through material things. The biggest surprise came about a year later. I was at a local coffee shop when I ran into one of Qley's old friends, the same one I'd overheard on the phone mocking me. She approached me hesitantly and said, "Hey, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what Qley put you through. We all saw how she treated you, but none of us ever called her out. That was wrong." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to ask why she was apologizing now, but instead, I just nodded and said, "Thanks. I appreciate that." She went on to tell me that Qley had burned a lot of bridges after our breakup. Her entitled behavior had alienated even her closest friends, and her reputation was in shambles. She tried dating someone else shortly after me, but apparently, he caught on to her manipulative ways even faster. Hearing that was strangely cathartic, not because I wanted her to suffer, but because it reaffirmed that standing up for myself had been the right choice. Sometimes, we're so afraid of conflict that we let people walk all over us. But if there's one thing I learned from this mess, it's that self-respect is non-negotiable. Looking back, I'm grateful for everything that happened, as painful as it was. It taught me the importance of financial independence, the value of boundaries, and the strength of resilience. And if someone ever tries to undermine what I've worked for again, they'll quickly find out I'm not the guy to mess with. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching. And seriously, subscribe, because the only thing crazier than this story is the fact that I've got more where that came from. Stay tuned.